Welcome to my adventures on the platform formerly known as Twitter. I have a very important installment for you today. By the way, my name is Alice, and I forgot about this because it's so important. So important. It's about the foundational aspects of feminism and the fact that they are about as credible as a unicorn fart. So, Twitter, I had this little fracas, fracas, a little kerfuffle with an individual called Meg. Meg will be our protagonist for the day. And it was in response to a tweet that I made that I shall tell you. Incidentally, I might as well do this on these shows as well. Why not? If you're interested in making comment on anything that you see, anything that I present today, you can do so at feedthebadger.com/justthetip. I will speak to it in the next Twitter adventures. And it's the very best way for you to help me out and the best way for you to send a message without dealing with comments or YouTube's comment enhancement system. So once again, that's feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Now let's get right into it. Let's get started. This was in response to my tweet. I said the following: bear with me. What if the effects of patriarchy are just the effects of biology, and what feminists are really trying to get men to apologize for is their very existence? Okay. Now, when I originally put out this tweet, it was quite an oversight on my part. I forgot about the influence of the Feminist Andronicus. That is, man as envisioned by feminist conjecture, right? And the Feminist Andronicus is, of course, the kind of man that men would have to be for feminist conjecture to be correct. And there is a pretty big gap between the behavior of actual men and the behavior of the Feminist Andronicus. The Feminist Andronicus for men, for feminists, is that men use domestic violence and rape in order to uphold patriarchy. So essentially, translating this to a feminist, you go from the effects of patriarchy, which I was thinking more like women being in the home, women being more associated with childcare, which they still are, and nursing and home production, and those kind of jobs that women could do while still caring for young children. That was what I was sort of referring to when it comes to the effects of patriarchy. Maybe also the expectation that men protect and provide for women, more pro-social, more about caring for your family and that kind of thing. The more of the things that you see men actually doing in real life. But of course, silly me, I forgot that feminists would reinterpret this with their envisioned man, the feminist Andronicus. So they thought I was saying, oh, what if men raping and beating women was just the effects of biology? What if men subjugating and torturing women and enslaving them and throwing them into the sandwich mines was the result of biology? So all throughout history, men have been domineering assholes, but she holds out hope it's not biological. All right, so I do my usual thing, which is I post statistics on rape and sexual violence to sort of try to move the needle on that idea that men engage in rape more, that this is something that men do. Rape their female relatives, beat their female relatives in order to construct a society that benefits them. How can you say that without proving that men do this more? And of course, I point out all of the counterproof to that particular assertion, in which women actually do a substantial portion of this as well. So if men are using this to keep women under control, you'd think they'd start with stopping women from raping and beating them. But, whatever. So in response to that, Meg says the following:
absolutely anyone can be an asshole.
And I say, and yet your worldview requires the bio-truth that it's a man thing. Even though you say it's not a bio-truth. It's just always associated with men. Funny how that works, huh? Boy, you really don't like my mouse today, bud. Okay, no. You're gonna destroy something. Please, no. See, it's not men who are domineering assholes. It's cats. Okay, so I continue. I think, okay, so.
I think you misread my op.
So men are domineering assholes unless what? Right? What is the criteria? And the answer is the application of women's control, right? How is that not a bio-truth? Okay, guys, think about it. Men are domineering assholes unless they are directed by women not to be. How is that not a bio-truth? If men get together, they get together to become domineering assholes. And throughout all of human history, and including our nearest relatives, domineering assholes, unless they're under the control of women.
I define patriarchal men as domineering assholes, and I choose to believe that is not biological. It's a choice.
Men left to their own devices, which one would presume would be their biological impulses, will become this way. But it's not biological. Right? It's not biological. So I ask her, what is patriarchy?
The ideology that withholds power from women and enforces what is known as traditional gender roles. Men are seen as the leaders, women are the followers.
Okay, this is really interesting because we've done a little bit of a switcheroo. I don't know if you've noticed that. We've gone from seeing the average man as the domineering asshole, the biologically domineering asshole, presumably with all of the rape and the domestic violence upholding patriarchy. And now we've gone to traditional gender roles. Men are seen as leaders, women are the followers. Okay. Men are seen as the leaders, women are the followers. For example, in chimpanzees, male chimps tend to be leaders and the female chimps tend to follow. Except, this is what's really interesting. If the female chimps don't like a male leader, he's not long for the leadership role. So there might be some advantage to being a follower here. We're not going to talk about that, right? But did you see how that sort of that de-escalated suddenly? We go from biologically domineering assholes, presumably using rape and domestic violence to uphold patriarchy, to men being leaders and women being followers. I think we're in the realm of a bot. Ugh, okay, we're under attack by an increasingly surly animal. You're not getting treats. I'm gonna put you. So where was I? Okay, so there's a little bit of a de-escalation going on here. So this is what I respond with. Men in leadership positions automatically means that men use that power to oppress women.
Not necessarily. But removing autonomy and agency from women is oppressive, and we can see that historically, when only men have access to power, that is what happens.
Do we, though? I suppose if you're assuming the Feminist Andronicus to be true, yes. But, I mean, I could assume all kinds of things. I could assume that every woman has the power of Elizabeth, the former Queen of England. I can assume a lot of things that aren't true. Okay, let me continue. I respond with, if men in power does not necessarily mean women oppressed, then what does it look like when men in power does not result in women being oppressed?
When men and women have equal access to that power. When having a penis stops being the qualification.
That's a qualification. Wow. Even the AI has problems with multisyllabic words. So I respond with, so essentially any society in which men have power over women automatically means women are oppressed. You see no way that this statement could be proven true or false. I do.
Do you have an example of a society where women have equality with men but are denied leadership positions?
There was an interesting segue that I'm going to take you guys on at the risk of losing everything that, like, because of Twitter threading, we go into another black hole and never return to the place that we entered. But this individual named Università della Red Pill di Genova says,
Soviet Russia. Sausage fest in the party. Half of engineers were and still are women. Worked much better than feminism. Actually, everything worked better for women's rights than feminism.
And of course, Meg says work better for whom, but we don't really want to respond to that. And I said, you could probably add ancient Egypt or hell, even ancient Rome. Ancient Rome had any gender equality? Yes, 100% it did. Roman women had a significantly greater access to economic opportunities than pretty much anywhere. Not to mention because Rome actually had an economy. But anyway, let's keep going. I'm going to go back. I'm going to navigate back, but I was going for a more abstract point. So there's no conceivable way to falsify the following statement. Men in power equals women oppressed.
Are you able to read?
What if I told you there is a way to falsify it?
I'm not claiming it. But go ahead.
So you're not claiming that men in power equals women oppressed. You realize I'm just rephrasing your statement in predicate logic.
Oh no, your reading comprehension sucks.
All right, we're playing a definition game. Okay. If men as a class hold power over women as a class, then women are oppressed. How's that?
That is the conversation. Glad to see you finally caught up.
Is this statement falsifiable? If men as a class hold power over women as a class, then women are oppressed.
No. Do you know what falsifiable means, though?
AI overview, definition of falsifiable. In science, a falsifiable statement, hypothesis, or theory is one that can be potentially disproven by an empirical test or observation. This means it's possible to imagine a situation where the statement is shown to be false. That's what I've been talking about. Is it falsifiable? Can it be proven false? Can it be proven true, for that matter? If it cannot be proven false, can it really be proven true? No.
And here I was using the legal definition.
AI overview. In a legal context, falsifiable generally refers to something that can be proven or demonstrated to be false. This is particularly relevant in situations where evidence or claims need to be scrutinized for accuracy and validity. In legal contexts like trial and investigations, falsifiable evidence or claims are those that can be challenged and potentially refuted, often through the presentation of contradictory evidence or logical arguments. So again, even in a legal context, this means a statement that can be proven true or false. Fucking idiot. So now we get into an additional, probably a co-traveler of myself, Lucy. I think I can explain Allison's point. Feminist patriarchy theory needs to be falsified to be considered scientifically valid. Falsifiable means to put to the test and examine the outcomes. A theory like carrots help you see better in the dark can be tested. Get a group of people, feed one lots of carrots, and the other starve off said carrots over time, and then give them an eye test to see how accurately they can read symbols on cards in a dark room. Compare the results of the two groups. Carrot-eating group gets significantly more right answers than the control. This is evidence towards its theory. Also controlling for extraneous variables, things like similar participants across both groups, controlled lighting for the tests, same set of symbols to read on cards, making sure nobody has some degenerate eye disease, etc. Carrots help you see better in the dark is a falsifiable theory. The test comes back with no difference between the carrot eaters and the control, then that disproves the theory. Ergo, it can be falsified. Feminist patriarchy theory states men use powerful to benefit themselves as a group at women's expense. Has no such test for it. Meg.
There is a test for this.
What is the test?
Before you can evaluate anything, you have to understand that subjugation of any people group is wrong.
People group. We're supposed to accept that men in power, because they're men, equals women oppressed. Even though the definition of oppression is not just has power and uses it unjustly and in a cruel way. Right? So there is actually a way to falsify this. Let's see if I can start up my drawing board. And we're back. So what happened was this. Void Cat walked onto my desk, turned the strobe light effect on the light, walked over there, turned off the camera, and then walked off as if that had been her intent the entire time. But hopefully all is sorted and we can get back to discussing the nature of authority and guardianship. So these are the Smiths. As I mentioned before, they've gotten some bad news. Little Timmy is severely developmentally delayed and will have to be under the guardianship of his parents for the rest of his life. Now, you can imagine in this scenario, the Smiths are not particularly happy about this outcome. This is, in fact, the last outcome that they wanted for their son. So having authority over another human being isn't actually a benefit in and of itself. Well, I want to make that very clear. This is not the Smiths gaining a benefit by being forced to assume guardianship over their son for the rest of his life, or at least as long as they're alive and he's alive. Smith's autonomy is actually also limited because they're now going to have to take care of their son for the rest of their life. they're not going to be able to necessarily take the vacations that they want to take. They're not going to be able to take the jobs that they want to take. They're not going to have the free time that they necessarily would have otherwise, because now they're responsible for the well-being of another human being. So there's going to be significant restrictions on their personal autonomy. So this isn't necessarily a good outcome. It's not one that is beneficial to the Smiths. Their autonomy actually decreases as a result of this change in their relationship with their son. And I wanted to point those things out because we're going to look at the situation for men and women under coverture. And I wanted to start with a more neutral example as we get into that. So under coverture, right? Maybe give her a little jaunty hat. Okay. So this is the Smiths again. Or no, you know what? I'll give it a different name because this will get confusing. The Smythes. They live in 19th century Victorian England. Right? So they live under coverture. Now, Mrs. Smythe is considered to be, in many respects, the ward of Mr. Smythe. Comparing the Smiths to the Smythes. All right. So the Smiths are going to be making all of Timmy's life choices. And one of the big differences between the Smiths and the Smythes is, of course, Timmy is not going to attain an adult level of understanding around the world. And we assume that Mrs. Smythe is. So you could say that that itself is a kind of oppression because it isn't recognized that she has adult autonomy. But is that really the case? Now, Mrs. Smythe will be able to contract debts in Mr. Smythe's name, which he will then have to pay. Smiths, they aren't responsible for his debts because there will be no legal way that Timmy can contract debts in their name. Now, crimes. When little Timmy does a crime, he will likely be the one who is incarcerated and not his parents. As for Mr. Smythe, he will be doing time for whatever crimes his wife engages in. The assumption will be that she did the crime under his wing, under his auspice. This is coverture. That's going to be the legal assumption. The legal assumption here is not that the boy, if he does any crimes, is doing it under the intent of his parents. Now, they may end up doing time for something like neglect or incitement if they're involved, but they won't be doing time for his crime. He'll still do time for his own crime, probably in some kind of mental ward. But he, Mr. Smythe, does do time for Mrs. Smythe's crimes, up to and including treason. Presumably, he doesn't do time if she murders him. Maybe that's time served. I don't know. Okay, so these are two fundamental differences between the two, and they're pretty critical because these represent autonomy that Mrs. Smythe has that little Timmy doesn't, and responsibilities that Mr. Smythe has that the Smiths do not have to little Timmy. Now, another comparison of these two is that there is a social expectation placed on the Smiths and Mr. Smythe to take care of their dependents. So Mr. Smythe will be very much in the doghouse if he doesn't provide for Mrs. Smythe financially. So he actually goes to jail, debitor's jail, if he can't provide for Mrs. Smythe. And that is regardless of whether or not he has the ability to do so. That's no defense. Now, this is not the case for Mr. and Mrs. Smythe. They need to take care of little Timmy, yes, but if they are unable to do so, they are not going to jail. No debitors present. This is based on an actual case in law. There was a case in which a wife, a Miss Smythe, is a doctor. She gets a significant amount of income. However, she is not actually responsible for paying the taxes on her income. Now, she happened to marry a teacher, and he did not have the money to pay the taxes on her income, so he wasn't able to do so. He had to default. He went to jail because he was the man, he was the husband, he was legally obligated to pay the taxes on her income. Not only could he not pay the taxes on her income, he couldn't even find out what the taxes were because that's privileged information between her and her tax auditor. Okay, so Mr. Smythe pays income tax pays income tax from Mrs. Smythe. That's not the case here. Smiths aren't responsible for Timmy's income tax. If he does have some, it's taken out of his income. Mr. Smythe is obviously responsible, and under coverture, he's legally responsible for her debts, her income tax, any crimes she engages in, and he's legally responsible for her upkeep. And he will be punished if he fails in any of these situations. He has authority, presumably. However, here's the problem, okay? No physical violence. Under coverture, it is not legal for a man to be physically violent to his spouse. And in fact, that is grounds for divorce and a restraining order. They had them back then. This is the case here too. Both the Smiths and Mr. Smythe can go to jail should they engage in any kind of physical violence. However, the expectation of responsibility is very different between the two of these. Right? The expectation of responsibility is quite high on Mr. Smythe under coverture. And here's the problem. Miss Smythe is an autonomous adult, but the law does not recognize her choices as being a result of her decisions. Instead, the law chooses to regard him as the culpable party for her choices when they intercede, when they collide with social expectation, right? He has no ability to enact his authority. There's absolutely nothing legally he can do to compel her to do anything under coverture. Can he be physically violent with her? No. No, that's not acceptable. Perhaps he can use verbal persuasion. Okay? Can she not also use verbal persuasion? And considering that his physical violence is considered much more socially inappropriate than hers, could she not also use physical coercion? And the answer is yes. He has the authority, but she has every coercive method available to her without having to take responsibility for her crimes, including some that you wouldn't even think of. Like, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to do a crime and you're going to do the time. If you don't do what I want, I'm going to default on my taxes and you're going to jail. If you don't do what I want, I'm going to run up a gigantic debt and leave you with it. These are all coercive methods that she has at her disposal, and yet he is considered to have authority over her. In the end of the day, it feels more like the government has to choose someone to punish, and it chooses him because it doesn't want to punish her. Okay, that's the authority in the past, and that's the most recent past, our most recent ancestors' cultural inheritance, etc. So we could go back further, but as I said before, all of this is very nuanced. You have to constrain what area of time you're talking about, what social system, what expectations, that kind of thing. You can't just be blanket. I'm sorry, feminists, you can't just blanket say men oppress women throughout the past. You actually have to prove it, and you actually have to constrain your scope. When you're dealing with different ethnicities, different cultures, different religions, you got to constrain your scope to each of those because they're very different things, very different. I hope I've clarified that having authority over someone isn't in and of itself a good thing. It isn't. It's a chore. It is even more of a chore when that authority comes with no actual ability to enforce it. With little Timmy, the Smiths are going to have the ability to enforce legally, socially, to a certain degree, more physically. Mr. Smythe doesn't. He doesn't have that. And we wouldn't look at the situation for the Smiths and say that the Smiths are oppressing little Timmy, would we? No. We would consider it an unfortunate situation in which they're actually not getting the best part of it. It's the same thing with Mr. Smythe. Coverture is an unfortunate situation for him. A very unfortunate situation, which is probably why Oliver Twist had a male character who was married to a somewhat larcenous woman say the law is an ass. If it thinks that she does what she does under my direction, the law is an ass. Okay? It's a very sort of unfortunate situation that Mr. Smythe is in. All the responsibility, no ability to enforce it. And it starts to feel less like men in that circumstance had authority more than the powers that be wanted someone to stick with the bill and have to blame. So I just wanted to go through with that because I think it's foundational to explaining why feminists can't just say men had authority over women or power over women or had more opportunity to be in power, which is the same thing. And that without any question from that follows women's oppression. So men in authority equal women oppressed, axiomatically. In fact, you don't even need women oppressed. It's just in men in authority. Is that really the case? Can we really honestly say that Mrs. Smythe is oppressed by this situation? Can we say Timmy is oppressed by this situation? If we can't say Timmy is oppressed by this situation, how can we say Mrs. Smythe is oppressed by it? By definition, I mean, she might be, but by definition, no, we can't. Now, here comes the question. When we can't say that men's authority over women automatically means women's oppression, what can we say? Well, we can create a causal statement. All right, let's put this in red. If, I'll use blue, men, little brackets, have authority, power, I'll use power, over women, then, and for women I'll use pink, purple, women are oppressed. Okay? Here we go. This is our causal statement. It can be falsified. And this is all I need to do, because that was what this entire conversation was about. Now, you might be asking me, how do we falsify that? How could we test for this? Here's my proposal. We look at a situation where men have power over women, such as coverture, and we ask the following question. I'll use black again. What is the outcome for women versus men? Who is better off? And there's a lot of different ways that you can look at that question. You could look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, go from the bottom, survival, protection, provision, and then move up to self-actualization and see where men and women lie in there. And then we also have to discuss how to weight the various factors, which is very difficult. How much do we weight women being at home versus men being drafted to war? That kind of thing. Do we weight women at being at home as a negative? Particularly in light of things like letters from women in the 19th century talking about how reducing their workload outside the home was a benefit. So here's another question. How much do we weight women's estimation at that time in their happiness over whatever circumstance they're in versus the feminist impression of women's happiness at that time? Because feminists would say women going into the home is oppression, and yet the women at the time considered that movement to be of benefit to themselves, and they were quite happy about it, and they felt it was liberating. And so how do we weight these things? A lot of wicked questions. We could probably, over time, figure out a framework, a reasonable framework, and one really critical issue is that the framework should fall on the same result, regardless if you plug the situation for men or the situation for women. Say women were the ones who were drafted. What would feminists say about that? About women wholesale losing their life, their well-being, their future, and then coming back to societies that don't even do anything to help generations of women being disappearing or coming back broken. How would feminists regard such a thing? How much weight would they put on women's suffering if they had to go through that? Now, we should take all of that, and it doesn't change if it's men. So we should be able to switch them back and forth and find the same weighting for all of these various issues. And once we've gone through all of that, and as you can tell, I mean, you should start to realize that this is a very complicated process, lots of nuance, lots of careful consideration of various factors. If men have power, then women are oppressed, actually becomes a very difficult thing to test for, which is something we should have realized when it was first proposed. You almost have to come to the conclusion that this is something that we simply can't assert because we could spend centuries trying to solve whether or not it was true. And at that point, don't you think it's rather unfortunate, shall I say, that we have regarded such a wicked question, a question that is so difficult to answer, as absolutely the answer is absolutely one thing, no question. And that we have now done 3 generations of social policy based on this broad brush for something that's this complex. I hope that gets the almonds jogging, the almonds rustling, the noodles agitating, the pierogies jostling. Okay? All right. All right. So anyway, that's all I have for that. Again, I hope you found this enlightening. If you enjoy this content, send me a message, feedthebadger.com/justthetip, or support it, feedthebadger.com/support. No sponsors here, just me, what is this thing? Tablet screen, and Brian and all the rest. So thank you for your kind attention. Thank you for your kind attention. Have a lovely evening, afternoon, second brunch, rally car drive, whatever you're doing, wherever you're doing it, have a great time. And see you in the next one.